Good evening. My name is Jose Luis Cruz, and I am privileged to serve as Lehman College's president. I am so pleased that WCBS and WNNY have chosen to host this important town hall meeting at Lehman tonight. Bronx residents have an opportunity to weigh in on the issues they feel need to be addressed by the candidates in this year's mayoral election. The challenges facing our local communities may seem daunting at times, and it doesn't help when the rhetoric and actions of those in charge of the federal government seem to be at odds with a meaningful way forward. But if we know anything about our democracy, it is that it is as resilient as the borough we all call home, and that sharing our ideas in a free, open forum only serves to strengthen it. That is why today's event is so important and why holding it here is so fitting, at a college that is deeply committed to social betterment through civic engagement. So thank you for joining us here tonight at what I am confident will be an informative and rewarding event. And please visit lehman.edu or follow us on social media to learn more about the college and upcoming events. Now it is my pleasure to introduce CBS 2's Chief Political Correspondent, Marcia Kramer. Marcia has covered politics for the television station for over 25 years. Her reports on the local, national, and international level have garnered her multiple honors, including 2 George Foster Peabody Awards, 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards, 5 Emmy Awards, and a first-place award from the Associated Press for her investigative reports. Please welcome your host for the evening, Marcia Kramer.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to say good evening to everybody who came here tonight. I am Marcia Kramer, and on behalf of CBS 2, along with our partners in this event, WCBS Radio 880, 1010 Wins News, New York Daily News, New York Immigration Coalition, and Common Cause New York, would like to welcome you to the first of a series of town hall meetings. Now, before we get started, again, I would like to thank our gracious hosts here at Lehman College. And joining me on the panel tonight, first of all, is Peter Haskell for WCBS Radio 880. Peter.
Well, we'll be holding these meetings in all 5 boroughs throughout the month of June, and it's one way as New Yorkers to let your voices be heard, a forum where you can share your questions and concerns, and to let us know what qualities you'd like to see in this year's candidates for mayor, comptroller, and public advocate.
So also joining us tonight is the City Hall Bureau Chief of the New York Daily News, Jillian Jorgensen. Jillian.
Thanks, Marcia. Together as news and civic organizations committed to community engagement, we would like the issues raised to reflect the concerns of New Yorkers from every corner of our city, from Pelham Park to Sunset Park and from Harlem to Flushing and Midland Beach. So this is truly your floor and your forum, and we are here to listen to your concerns.
So you may wonder what the last chair is for. It's not for a ghost. It's actually for Juliet Papa from 1010 Wins Radio, who I believe is probably having some traffic problems, and she'll be joining us as soon as she gets here. But I want to tell you that we will be recording your questions and concerns and sharing them with our viewers. This town hall meeting is being streamed on cbsnewyork.com. Now, I want to just go over some rules here tonight. In the spirit of maximizing participation and making sure we can hear from as many of you as possible, we ask for your cooperation with a few ground rules. If you have a question or comment, please line up in front of the microphone that's set up here to the side of the stage. And if you'd like to follow up, please keep your comments brief so that we don't run out of time. And now if you have a comment you would like to make in Spanish, we will help in translation for the rest of our audience. The other thing I'd like to tell you is that if there's more things that you'd like to talk about, you could wait till everybody else has had an opportunity and certainly come back to the microphone if you'd like to do that. So if you'd like to line up, the first person to get to the microphone is the first person who gets to ask the first question.
Run, don't walk.
Take your time. We have our first questioner. Ma'am, maybe you could tell us your name and what you'd like to ask, what you'd like the mayoral candidates or the public advocate or controller candidates to be talking about.
Okay. My name is Vivian Carter, and I own a home in the Rockaways, and I also rent and work up here in the Bronx. So I've driven around the streets of New York City, particularly the outer boroughs, for many, many years in very bad traffic, which is obviously, as everyone knows, gotten like hugely worse with all the license plates with the T in front of them. I drive behind them, so I see how many cars are for hire vehicles as opposed to private vehicles. I am fortunate that I am in a private vehicle and a hybrid, so I'm not using a lot of gas to get around. But the dangerous problem that affects me every day is all of the cars and trucks stopped in traffic that are such a hazard. And I know this seems like a personal gripe of my own, but I think it implicates so many other things. The safety of schools, when you see all the parents that will drop the kids off in front, when you see that double parking is treated like some kind of a sacrament in New York City, you know, FedEx drivers, people picking up someone in front of a house. I don't understand it, and I don't see too many people talking about it. It's made it almost impossible to drive around. I mean, you know, you try to avoid the freeways because they're bad, and you get on the side streets, and this is all you have to deal with is getting around cars every day.
So if you would put that in a specific question to a mayoral candidate, what would you say?
I would ask whether or not there is a reason why they cannot control the problem of double parking.
So is there a feeling
It is
on your...
rampant.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you could be on a block in like Washington Heights, and you're sitting there waiting for the light, and you realize you're in a lane that is completely from one end to the other. Double parked cars. You aren't even in a traffic lane, and you don't realize that they have taken over the entire block. In Washington Heights, I've seen that repeatedly, and I know it's because there's a block with lots of stores, but it's so rampant, and I don't know about anybody talking about it, so it affects me. I just wanted to put it out there.
So you think things are getting worse?
Oh my gosh.
Is it the double parking? Is it the for-hire vehicles? What do you think it is?
Well, because if you look at all the social factors and the fact that all of the people getting things ordered online and delivered to their businesses and homes, there's like 1 billion more delivery trucks. And like I said, the for-hire vehicles, you did not ever see that many license plates with T's on them. I don't know where the private cars are. Maybe it's just in the Bronx that not as many people own private cars. But I've found that it's like they violate the traffic laws. Same thing, like with impunity, people making, you know, right turns from the far left lane. I just see a lot of lawlessness out there, and I wish that somehow I'd ever see a cop writing or trying to pursue someone. I realize it's hard. I don't know what they can do about it.
That's interesting. The mayor has recently talked about cracking down on these kinds of things that cause congestion, like double parking and other parking violations. I guess, have you noticed, it's only been kind of recent that he's talked about this ticket blitz, but have you noticed anything changing even in the last few weeks, or does it still seem to be only getting worse on your commute?
Well, I just notice when they do a blitz in an area like a school or a commercial strip, and it's so comforting to be driving by and seeing a police vehicle, and they put the little, you know, the sound thing on, and boop, 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 get out of the way. And then you're like, yes, why don't they do that every day? You see it like once a year. I'm sorry, but that's...
So it's not enough?
It's clearly not enough, and I don't know.
Have you tried calling 311? Have you gotten any satisfaction from that?
You know what, 311 is great where there's one block, but I drive a half an hour. It takes a half an hour to drive 5 miles in the Bronx during rush hour, and that's not going on the Deegan, that's going on little side streets. And I probably see at least 10 cars per block, double parked. So as I'm proceeding on my route, and it seems to me that's a rampant problem that is lawlessness, and it needs to be addressed. So,
thank you very much for sharing that. Our next question is going to be from, introduce yourself and tell us what section of the Bronx you live in.
Roxanne Delgado, Pelham Parkway section of the Bronx. My question is, why can you, the mayor, introduce a bill to restrict the carriage horses to work only in the park? No need to spend millions to build a stable in the park. Also include the humidity factor in the temperature restriction. Currently, horses are working in heat index above 95. I and many animal advocates helped your campaign based on your promise, yet you did not do anything to improve the working conditions of the horses. And my question would be, what will you do to help alleviate the suffering of New York City carriage horses?
So I guess the thing that I'd ask you is, are you disappointed in the fact that the mayor made a promise the last time he ran to do something about the carriage horses and then didn't do anything?
Of course, because I I volunteer all summer for him solely based on that promise, and I donated money to him, and I don't even have money. I barely can pay my rent, and I donated over $200 to his campaign, which is a lot of money to me. And I think he didn't use much political capital to keep his promise, because considering all the scandals and things he pushed onto the city council, he could have done this for us. It really doesn't affect that many New Yorkers, but there's a few that, like me, that really care about this issue.
So, just if I could follow up with you, do you think that other mayoral candidates who are running, that you would want to ask them if they would make a promise to take the carriage horses off the street?
Well, if they do, I would definitely throw my support to them and even volunteer for them, because it seems like de Blasio couldn't deliver on his promise. And I don't think he'd really try, honestly. At least restrict him to the park. He could, because most city council members were willing to restrict him to the park, not do a total ban, but he really didn't do much arm twisting.
And I'm curious, because clearly you have concerns about the animals, but you also mentioned the money being spent for the stables inside the park. How much is the budgetary issue a concern versus just the animal rights?
Well, I don't see why they would privatize a certain part of the park just to accommodate a very small industry, considering that how many jobs are lost daily and have more impact on us. And most of the carriage industry is owned by less than a handful of carriage owners who could basically transfer the medallions to a different transportation mode of transportation. I just don't see why we're bending over backwards for such an industry. I mean, just recently, a delivery man from Coca-Cola lost all their jobs. I didn't see any politicians standing up for them. I mean, what's going on here?
So it's both. It's the budget as much as the animal welfare.
I would definitely not spend any money to end this industry. It just could be done either restricted to a park or just a total ban. And again, the impact on our economy would be very little, and most of these owners are already I mean, they have the medallions for over 3 decades. How long will they profit from the animal exploitation? It makes no sense to me.
Would you prefer a total ban? I know that's what he was talking
Honestly,
about
I would
first.
rather have a ban, but considering that it's not going nowhere, restricting them to the park will at least alleviate a little of their suffering, because right now they're in Times Square till 2 a.m. in the morning. And you know, Times Square is so congested, even especially now during the summer. It's just very sad for me.
Well, you know, I guess the question I have is this: if you would prefer a ban, what about the idea of taking them out of the downtown New York area, Central Park area, and maybe putting them at Prospect Park or a park in Queens, or, you know, in the Bronx, instead of in, you know, downtown Manhattan where there's so many more cars? Would that be acceptable to you?
No, because the industry is a tourist. There's not going to be tourists in Bronx or Prospect Park. But why move them? You could still just restrict them to Central Park instead of allowing them to work outside the park all throughout Midtown and Broadway till 2 a.m. in the morning. Again, it won't solve all the issues, but it will address some of them. Some is better than nothing. Right now, we don't have anything for these animals. And plus, they're working in temperatures above 95 with the heat index. In most cities, they have at least minimum requirements. We don't have any for these horses. I mean, make some improvements. I mean, it's a compromise I'm not happy with, but it's something.
Marcia, was this something the mayor said he would do on day one?
The mayor actually said he would do
I
it
know.
on day one, if you recall, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, he
He
did.
said it several times. In all his fundraisers and events that we held for him, he said day one. He promised. He didn't even address the issue till year end, and there was a bill that was half written poorly.
Well, maybe he meant day one of his second term if he got elected.
You never know.
Okay, is there
Thank you so much.
anything else
Thank
that you'd
you.
like to ask?
No, thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Next.
Courtesy abounds.
If you could introduce yourself, ma'am, and get near the microphone.
Hi. Well, first of all, I'd like to say, Marcia, Kramer, you rock. And yes, those are fabulous shoes.
Thank you for saying that.
My name is Kate Cardona. I'm an activist and organizer in the Pelham Parkway section of the Bronx. And I have actually 3 questions. but
Okay, give us the first one first, and then you can go to the others.
It might, if I go into all 3, it'll take a lot of time.
Well,
As
pick
a
the one that you want the best, and then you could come back after everybody else has had a turn. How about that?
Sounds good. I think that my greatest concern right now, because this hits home, not just for me, but other people that I know, as an activist and organizer, and people I know personally, homelessness to me and other people seems to be on the uptick. I
Right.
don't see any improvement in it. I actually see larger numbers. Recently, I've spent a lot of time in housing court with my own case and with other people. My zip code and another in the Bronx have our own courtroom because the eviction rates are off the chart. Legal Aid actually opened up an office specifically to deal with my area code 10467 and 10457, which is the Concourse Village, which is becoming extremely popular to developers and hipsters and yuppies and stuff. And I don't think that the numbers that I'm hearing are accurate. As a survivor of domestic violence, I've been tracking this issue for about 15 years, as I was homeless myself, and I may...
So you think, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're thinking that there are more homeless than you
I
think
think
the
there's a
city is
lot more
admitting to?
than what's actually being told to the public, and I don't think it's necessarily to deceive the public, but I think people would be more frightened if they knew how many people are actually, and I know people on the verge, and I saw a 92-year-old lady get evicted because she was, you know, she didn't know what to do, she had no representation, and she wound up in a nursing home. A judge had no choice but to evict this woman.
So if you put that in a form of a question to the mayor or a mayoral candidate, what you want to hear? What would the question be?
What are we going to do about this issue? How are we going to stop homelessness from happening, and how are we going to put the people that are currently homeless and those that are about to be evicted tomorrow and the day after, because I see this day after day, how are we going to help these people achieve a permanent housing situation rather than go into the shelter system? There are still cluster apartments. The shelter system is a nightmare. People get separated. My son's 24. If I lose my apartment, he's going to end up in one place. I'm going to end up in another. The cat's going to go back to Baidoui, where he came from. I mean, how do you help people? I want to know what can be done to help people, because I also want to guide people in my community, if I can, so I can help them in some way.
Well, one of the things that has been proposed in Albany would be having the city or the state provide rent subsidies to help people stay in their homes so they won't become homeless. I wonder if you would want to ask the mayoral candidates where they stand on that issue, and if that's something that appeals to you.
Yeah, that's absolutely something, because my own lawyer applied for something and I didn't qualify because I was never in an HRA approved sanctioned shelter. There's all these like little nitpicky and I can understand why they have their reasons, but every day I'm seeing more and more people, you know, losing their homes, and I'm facing that too now, because I'm only part-time employed and my son's part-time employed, and it's just, it's heartbreaking.
It's interesting to me that you're bringing up the situation in housing court. I've heard the same from some advocates in the Bronx. I actually did a story a while back about, I think it was Bronx Works, has a program where they work with people who are facing eviction, and they get some funding from the city. I'm actually not sure if that wound up in the budget this time around, but they work with people who are in that position to try to give them, you know, a little bit of a subsidy or anything like that to pay back rent, or to sort of retain their home, because the thought being that's much less expensive than sheltering those people if they do lose their home. But those advocates say the same thing, that they're seeing a huge spike in the amount of housing court cases in that area, which is interesting considering the mayor, when he talks about homelessness, often cites efforts that they've done to try to keep people in their home before they get into shelter. I know there's also a movement for right to counsel in housing court, which has been approved on a
I'm starting
smaller
to
scale.
see that now, that people aren't falling through the cracks quite as much as they were. And if I see someone that Legal Aid or something hasn't approached them, and I see them in a courtroom, I will go up to them and talk to them. You know, I'll start a conversation if they look friendly or they're not frightened by me, you know, and I'll see if I can't guide them to an attorney or any housing advocates that I know in my area, West Bronx and East Bronx.
Yeah, would you want to hear more about plans from candidates for, you know, what they do once it's in the housing court phase?
This is a very great concern to me. I'm almost 60, and I'm finding myself facing that I may have to move down south as I approach retirement age, because there's just no way. I got a one-shot deal, and they want $215 a month from me, like a loan, to pay back, and I'm supposed to keep up with rent and everything. I'm like, you know, where am I supposed to get this money? You know, so, and I see this all the time with people that I advocate for, survivors and victims of domestic violence, people that are new to the country, elderly people that are, like I call myself the tweens, those between 55 and 65, that we don't qualify for certain programs and senior centers, and it's just, you know, incredibly sad.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you to just sit down and save your other two questions. We can give somebody else a chance, and then you can come back for a second and go at
I'll
it.
be here all night.
We have another person who'd like to ask a question.
You know, can we just bring her the mic?
We're going to give you this mic.
Just hold it.
Sorry. So you can lower the mic if it's easier for you to. No, just push the top down like this.
Push the top.
There you go.
Yeah, I should be used to this.
Okay.
Oops.
Peter, if you want
You
to.
do this. Well,
You hold it.
You can hold
hold
it
it? I'm used to holding it.
if that's easier for you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Dawson. I'm Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Pelham Parkway. When de Blasio came into office, he had a program. He has a program, Vision Zero.
Yes.
Vision Zero is supposed to stop pedestrian deaths. Hit and runs are on the rise, but it seems that hit and runs and pedestrian fatalities, well, it's on the rise. I'm asking, and I don't think it's working. You know, me as a mom who's lost a son, I don't think Vision Zero is working for me. I'm asking for, I would ask the mayor for stiffer penalties for these offenses for impaired and distracted driving.
So your specific question to the mayor is what he's going to do about it, going after the people who are impaired or distracted?
Right.
And you'd like to see a more intense crackdown?
Yes, because this is happening every day, every weekend. You're always hearing of an accident. I mean, like, maybe sometimes it's not always the driver's fault, that people are just playing with their phones in the street and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. But the thing is, I think that there should be stiffer penalties. I also think that when you're 16, you should not be driving a car because teenagers are more distracted. They're talking in the car, they're having fun, good time, and they're really not paying attention with their friends. I think that the driving age possibly should be put up to 17 or 18 years old, you know. And I also think that when a teenager, like the one who killed my son, he only got a small amount of time in jail, and that should be changed.
So your questions for the mayor would be, for a mayoral candidate, would be, would you support increasing the age when people can get a driver's license?
Yes.
To 17 or 18?
Right.
And would you also support penalties for, increased penalties for distracted or impaired driving?
Yes, I would. Also, the interlock should be put on the car, you know, so that they can't drive the car if they're drunk. If you ever saw one of those, you would like, it's an apparatus where you blow into it, and it will not let you drive the car.
Okay.
It's hard to explain.
I'm just curious, your thoughts on Vision Zero and what's happened. What do you think? Do you think it's done anything, number one? And you suggest it's not enough. In terms of Vision Zero, what else, if anything, would you like to say?
I really have heard about Vision Zero, but it's like when you talk to people, they say, oh, well, we've given out a lot of tickets. We've arrested people with impaired driving or drug driving, you know. And I feel that a lot more can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as the next person comes down to the microphone, I would like to read two questions that we have gotten from our social media participants. Lynn Chiarucci says, how and when would they roll back the property real estate taxes and commercial and residential for commercial and residential properties? And Matthew Seidman, also of the Bronx, wants to know, how exactly does a mayor separate his or her personal views and professional reviews from mainstream media? So could I ask the next person to come on down? Okay.
Don't be shy.
Is there somebody that wants to come down that doesn't want to be on camera, that we could just hear your voice? Okay, we'll have you come in down next, ma'am. We will have the camera woman just shoot us, and you can ask your questions. Okay, introduce yourself, please.
How you doing? So my name is Darlene Jackson, and my first question is...
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Sorry. So my first question is the lack of awareness of local community boards. I currently work at a community board in East Harlem, and I had no knowledge of community boards until I saw the job posting back in November. And I was pretty, shocked because I kind of felt robbed of my contribution to my own community if I would have known that these community boards exist. And so, one, the awareness that this is a platform for local residents to have a space to address the very issues that impact their daily lives. And even within the local community boards, they're independent agencies, and they vary of how they operate. It varies very all across all 52 community boards. There needs to be more funding from the mayor's office or even elected officials about the capacity building to equip these, because they're volunteers. There needs to be more capacity building about, the land use and the rezoning that's going on in all the 5 boroughs. And so, I question, why does that even exist? Like, why does people know that local community boards are a space for local residents to address the needs and hold the elected officials accountable?
To me, the question is it incumbent upon the city, or is it incumbent upon residents to find out how to address their concerns and views?
Well, if they have no knowledge of it, how are they even going to ask, right? And so I think if you have elected officials that represents districts, I think, and they're there to serve the people, they should be able to go out into the community they service and let them know you have a local community board where you can address, they have public meetings addressing housing, education, healthcare, that meets the needs of the community. So it shouldn't just rely on the people just trying to find out. Elected officials there to provide, so they work for the people, and they tend to forget that. And I feel like even with this election right now, like, I'm shocked I'm at Lehman College and this auditorium is not at capacity. And so I appreciate the fact that you guys are having this town hall, and I think it's the right timing, but which leads me with this election season. Why there's no voter registration drive? New York is like the 41 out of 50 states that has the lowest registration participation. And I'm going to Albany tomorrow to pass early voting, and people to be able to vote the same day, because we had like the worst voting restrictions in New York.
I think you're raising a really great point. Community boards play a big role in the earliest parts of the rezoning processes, which are a really big thing right now with the mayor's affordable housing plan. He actually took a little bit of heat, I guess it was about a year ago, or maybe a little more, for sort of not listening to the concerns of some of those community boards, some of which voted against some of these rezonings. And you're right, they're only, they're not binding votes in most cases. And a lot of people have pushed for the mayor's office to put more money into the community boards. They're usually the people who know the local issues best. For reporters, they're really great resources. They're the first people to notice when something's not right in their community. So I totally hear your point.
Okay, so I'll come back for my second question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ma'am, did you want to come down? This lady would like to raise an issue, but she doesn't want to be on camera, so she could come to the microphone and talk, and we'll keep the camera on us, so she'll feel comfortable. And while she's doing that, I'd like to read a question from our social media participant, Edwin Vasquez, who says, double standards with placards, courtesy cards, police cards on the dash, parking everywhere and everywhere. he wants to ask the mayoral candidates what they're going to do about that. And Anna Marie Coyle, why does de Blasio put illegal aliens before actual U.S. citizens? Yolanda Negron, improve housing with surveillance cameras. Too many crimes are happening every day. So she wants to know whether they'll put more surveillance cameras in housing complexes. And now we're ready for you, ma'am.
Yeah, hi.
You got to talk loud, though.
Yeah,
I know
hi.
you're a little shy, but you could do it.
Yeah, I'm living in the Bronx, and right now I'm going through a very...
Step a little closer to the microphone.
I'm going through a very rough time right now. We were in the shelter, and over a year now, we do not cook because we do not have. The landlord did not give us any stove. We are on the verge of becoming homeless again. And I cannot put my kids through this.
Why are you on the verge of becoming homeless
Because
again?
he wants us out of the place because I did not have any stove over a year. I have to use the money to buy food. I never used these things to buy food outside. I always cook for my kids, for my family. I cannot do it. I have to buy food outside. Something I don't used to. My pressure is high.
So you've had no way to cook food for a year?
I have to buy electric pots. When I do buy it, when I started to cook, it blew the whole thing out. I called Con Ed. Con Ed said they cannot touch that. They cannot touch it. You understand? There's a lot of stuff that's going on. And I'm asking for help. I need an apartment. I cannot go back in. I cannot put my kids through this. I cannot go back into the shelter. I need somewhere. They're building all these houses here in the Bronx. And I applied for all of them. And I cannot get not even one for my family.
So basically you'd like to get on the mayor's radar so that you can qualify for one of these new apartments?
I need something. Right now, I had it with landlords. I had it with landlords. I do not want any more landlords. Right now, I'm trying to see if I can get rent to own. And I do not know if they have that, a rent to own, so I don't have to put my kids through this again, because
Have you tried reaching out to any city agencies so far to see if they can help you with the issue with your landlord not using?
I tried home base. I'm tired. I'm trying home base. No, it seems like no one is not helping.
Yeah.
I cannot put my kids through this anymore. I want to cook. I cannot go outside. Every month I have to override my checking account to get food for the kids. It's not right.
Yeah.
Have you checked with your council person or any other elected
I
official?
do not know who it is. I just need somebody to help us get an apartment because I'm trying to get an apartment and every time I go, they check my credit.
Ma'am, I think that what we'll do is that when this is over, we'll get your name and contact information and see if we can check up on some things for you.
Because the apartment that we're living into, I don't know how this guy get it passed, but they get it passed. He did not fix the holes in the wall. The mouse is coming out of the wall. They're dropping their feces. My kids have asthma.
Right.
And I'm trying to get out of there. So what can you guys do to help us?
Well, we'll try to ask those questions for you.
And one more thing. These young people need jobs. My guys apply for so many jobs and cannot get any. They need jobs. We need jobs for these young people to take the guns out of their hand and put jobs so that they can have something for their family.
So you also want to know what the mayor or the mayoral candidates will do to create jobs for people like
For these,
yourself.
yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. And if the next person could make their way to the microphone, I'm going to read 2 more questions. One from Marianne Edwards, who says, how will housing improve? She's sort of following in your footsteps, ma'am. And then a person in the audience wants to ask how housing for low-class families are going to be handled with all the building that's going on, and how can people apply. She says, my family can't get in, and for families who have problems with credit, we can't get in a good home. Can you help us, please? So we'll take that up. Sir, your question.
First of all, let me start by saying I think you're wonderful and I love CBS.
Okay.
My name is Mario Ortiz, and for over 3 years in my community, we've been plagued by mail fraud. Everyone in my community has faced challenges paying their bills. Some of them never get to pay it, only to find out that they've been cashed in some other states. So I've contacted my local assemblywoman, and they've worked in conjunction with the other people in my community, and they've contacted the Postmaster General. I think this transcends any candidate or anything. My question would be, what I would like to see happen is that they institute the new mailboxes to ensure that everybody's bills get paid and everyone receives their mail.
That's really interesting. Jillian? Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Is there anything that you think the city would be able to do? You know, sometimes city governments have some issues with post offices and post office employees because they're federal employees and are sometimes exempt from city regulations. Did you get any sense of what might be able to be done on the local level when you talk to your state representatives?
They removed one of the boxes,
okay.
And they replaced the mailbox now with ones that have a slit that you slide the mail in, which is more effective and tamper-proof.
I'm not sure I understand. You're talking about outgoing mail?
Yes.
And this is a box that's on a street corner?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying it's prevalent where you are?
Yes.
All right. So what thoughts do you have about what you would like to see the city do about this?
Right. If they can implement or put new mailboxes in.
I see.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Is there someone else who'd like to approach the microphones? I see some people who are coming down now. So while we're waiting, Nikki McCallum via Facebook, how do you plan to clean up the Build It Back program? It seems the agencies involved are dragging their feet on it. A question for any mayoral candidate. Sir, your question. Give us your name and what you'd like to ask.
How do you do? My name is Peter Stand. I live in Kingsbridge Heights, which is kind of where you are right now. And it's more of not so much a direct question. I would really like to see a mayoral candidate actually articulate a vision for our city. Because in the last election, we had no one articulating a vision. We had personal politics thrown on the table. I think, additionally, we have 5 boroughs in this city. I'm a resident born and bred in the Bronx. The Bronx isn't Queens. Queens isn't the Bronx. And I think a mayoral candidate that understands that our boroughs are different, respects that difference, and engages in an inclusive process as they run for office would be a great thing for this town. And if anyone running for office could actually articulate a vision, affordable housing, cultural preservation, expansion of open space, all the things that make this a phenomenal place to live.
So basically, the specific question you would have for the mayor would be, how will you tailor your vision of the city for the specific needs of people who live in the Bronx?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, the Bronx is going through major changes right now, from a place that was feared for at least a generation, We have now communities, and the poorest communities in the United States are in this borough, where you can now rent studio apartments for $1,300 a month.
Are you concerned
So it's a kind of an inclusive vision of who we are and our neighborhoods that can reflect change, but at the same time works towards preservation and not throwing people out.
Well, maybe you could tell us what you think the Bronx is that you would like the mayoral candidate to address.
What I think the Bronx is. I don't think we actually have time. I think the Bronx is a very diverse community that has very large numbers of immigrants. My family, when they first came to this country in the 20s, came through the Bronx. And our neighborhoods are solid kind of working class communities, possibly with one or two exceptions up in Riverdale and Fieldston. And rather than gentrifying this borough, what are the assets we have that can be looked at by a candidate, that can actually be articulated by a candidate so that they understand that, again, this is the Bronx, this isn't Queens, this isn't Manhattan, this isn't Brooklyn.
So basically you're also concerned about gentrification.
Yes, I am. I mean, you know, in the sense that I have children who cannot, when they graduated college, afford to move into the community where they grew up. Absolutely.
How do you think the mayor has addressed the issues that affect you and the Bronx?
I think the current mayor rules from City Hall without recognition and imposes plans through our community boards, rather than engaging the people in the community boards as well as the number of organizations, the schools and the nonprofits that exist in this borough. And that, I think, is a real central issue and a real problem.
I'm curious what you make of the mayor's visit, I guess it was late last month. He did a week-long stint in the Bronx as part of his City Hall in your borough effort. I'm curious whether you think he learned anything or if it needs to be something deeper.
I actually don't think our mayor pays attention to what the people are talking about. I think our mayor has a vision. I don't want to say that he doesn't, but I think that that is a political vision and a personal vision. I don't think it necessarily reflects the various communities that exist in all the boroughs of the city.
What do you think he's looking at? What do you think his vision is?
I'm actually not quite sure. I think he's looking for a broader political platform to increase his resume and move on. I mean, you know, in the broadest sense, anyone who kind of goes to Brooklyn to go to a gym, I mean, he lives in Yorkville. I mean, give me a break. What does that mean in terms of his putting out an agenda that's actually understood by all of us who work in this city, who don't necessarily have the luxury of doing that, to really understand the issues that guide us through our lives, our children's schools, you know, how we age in this town.
So you would like whatever the mayoral candidate, whoever they are, be it other Democratic challengers, the mayor himself, or Republicans, to have a specific vision for your borough?
I would like that. I would assume people in other boroughs would like the same thing. But yes, you know, I don't wish to, yes, exactly. This is my home. It's been my home for 60-some-odd years.
Okay.
You know?
Thank you very much for
Thank
sharing
you.
that. If the next person could come to the microphone as they're making their way. We have a question from Kathleen Canzionero. She says, what do they plan to do about the excessive building of new malls and luxury housing in the Bronx and have actual affordable housing? I think affordable housing is really a theme that seems to run through a lot of questions tonight. And now we have you, sir.
Hi, my name is Aaron. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for coming.
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. One of the issues I have, and I think it's important for the city, pertains to education. There are certain core classes that all school children take from, you know, elementary school through high school and even through college. And they tend to be based around reading, writing, math, and science. Mm-hmm. And I think that those are essential classes. But I think that they ought to add an additional class to that, one called morality and ethics. I think it's important for people to, especially children, to know the difference between right and wrong. And we may say as adults that we know the difference between right and wrong, but as children and teenagers, it's not easy for them, and a lot of them, at times, they don't know the difference between right and wrong. And I think that there should be an initiative to promote a class that teaches morality and ethics in addition to reading, writing, math, and science.
So your question to every mayoral candidate would be, would you support and fund classes in morality and ethics? And I guess the question would be, at what age would you like to start that?
Well, that's exactly my question. And I think that maybe even children as young as 7 or 8, and definitely going through high school, there should be a class that teaches morality and ethics. It should be as prevalent as any other core class because it's important.
Do you think it has to be a separate course, or could it be integrated into other classroom activities?
I think it should be a separate course. I mean, there's typically 8 periods in a school day, and besides recess and lunch, there's reading, writing, math, and science, and I think you have an extra period where you could teach morality and ethics, and I think it's important for all children and young adults to know, especially because young people, they don't really know the difference between right and wrong, and I think it's very helpful. And I think even in the long term, it would have a very positive effect on crime, like in reducing crime and getting people to, act and do the right thing and know the difference and enlighten them in a way that they haven't been enlightened.
Would you like to see police officers come into the classroom to do some of those lessons?
I think that would be good. I think teachers, police officers, or even, anyone who knows or who has like stories to tell. But, I think someone who's qualified, someone who knows. I mean, you could even have, without getting religion overly involved, a priest or a rabbi come into class and teach some of these very important topics. And if there's a mayor who's willing to endorse that, I would definitely be willing to endorse that mayor.
So you think this is something that should be a mandated part of the curriculum as opposed to something that is suggested or recommended?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have somebody else who has a question that you'd like to come to the microphone? And while the next person comes down, what? Okay. We only have about, wow, time goes really quickly. We only have about 10 minutes left, so if you have a question, you should come down right now because otherwise we're going to run out of time. So we have a question from Brian Fernando. What would you do to the rising rent costs across the 5 boroughs, and how would these rent costs be driven? How have these rent costs driven residents out of their communities? Sir, your question.
Okay. Yeah, it's very impromptu. I forgot my glasses, so forgive me. I'm actually a candidate for District 15 City Council, but I have questions for the mayor as well. My name is Jason Cancel. What are or will they be doing about inadequate city workers that are not fulfilling their duties of their jobs and having citizens' complaints fall on deaf ears? And my second question is, why do they think throwing shelters at already struggling areas is a good idea?
Okay. In the interest of getting everybody in, if anybody else has a question, let's line up at the mics now so that we can make sure we get everybody's question, if you don't mind. If you could come on down. Sir, did you have a question? Why don't you come next? And we're going to try to get as many questions in as we can in the next 10 minutes.
Yes, please, ask them all, please, because I would like to know this one.
I'm sorry?
Ask them all. Don't be scared, everybody. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Hello, my name is Angel Rosario. My quick question would be community policing, as far as that's concerned, because community policing is very important. The mayor is trying to do community policing, but if you go to the website for the Bronx and you enter information trying to see when the next meeting is, there is none. So it's something spoken about, but not something that's being done.
So what would your specific question to the mayor be?
My specific question is, are we going to go forward with community policing? Whoever becomes mayor, whoever's going mayor, because community policing is important.
Okay, thank you very much. Ma'am. Hi,
Good
welcome.
evening. Hi,
Thank
my
you
name
for
is
coming.
Monica Raybon. I've lived in the Bronx my whole life. I've even went to Lehman College. I want the next mayor to lobby the federal government for more funds. I know that Trump is cutting the budget. We're the #1 city in the world. We need more money. We're vulnerable to terrorist attacks. We have a lot of poverty, housing problems. I want the next mayor to really, go to Washington and lobby, the president for more money for New York City, for New York.
Do you want it for terrorism? Do you want it for poverty? What would you like to see the money for?
For everything. Because I remember when Ford said, drop dead New York, and I feel like Trump is saying the same thing, like he doesn't care about New York, and I really want somebody to step up, the next mayor to step up and do whatever he has to do to get more money for this wonderful city.
Okay, next. And while you're making your way to the microphone, Sharon Nelson via Twitter, when will women have a fair chance to run for office in the Bronx? Ma'am, go ahead.
How you doing? Sorry.
You can take the microphone.
Okay. So I was actually in the Bronx for the City Hall in your borough, and I got a chance to speak to Mayor de Blasio. And to answer your question, he's not transparent whatsoever to his constituents. He deliberately ignored my questions, and he is only creating animosity and tension and distrust to the people that he serves. He says the closer you to the people is easier to serve them, but yet when constituents is asking direct questions, he's basically just running from being held accountable. And he on March 31st, he made an announcement that he was going to close Rikers Island. So he stated that he was in a mass incarceration didn't start here in New York City, but it would end here. And so, but he has yet to publicly announce to the public what that rollout plan looks like, and to involve the people directly impacted by Rikers Island in that rollout plan. And so he just redirected me to the community affairs unit, to a third party who has no knowledge of this plan, and it's just basically a loophole. And so address this young lady's her story about being homeless. Nobody's really addressing the root causes of any of these issues. They're throwing around these binary reforms to say, okay, to just shut people up. And we don't need any binary reforms. We need people to address the root causes of poverty and all these systemic racism that's happening within all these institutions, in our educational system, in our health care, and there's supposedly affordable housing, which is affordable to whom exactly, and even in the educational system. It's so, New York City is the most segregated school system in the country, and we need people, elected officials, to be held accountable and to really address the root causes of all these issues and stop throwing around these banning reforms just to shut the constituents up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see other people in the audience who haven't had an opportunity to talk. Is there anyone else that would like to come down and raise an issue?
Just a quick remark regarding the morality and ethics in courses. Humane education is mandated by the state, but for some reason city schools don't follow it, which I don't understand, because it's been mandated by the state for that to be included. And humane education includes how your action impacts others, not just towards the environment, towards other people. So I don't understand why the city doesn't follow the state law.
So what specific question would you ask a mayor or mayoral candidate?
Why doesn't the mayor follow the state law mandating humane education? And it should be included, as the gentleman stated, that for ages between 7 and 8, it should be included in a separate class. It's very important for kids not only to learn how to take a test, but to be a good citizen of the city.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? I would like to read a question from Sammy Sela. How is the next mayor going to battle welfare fraud? And another one from Rolando Martinez Jr. What about the crime rate around the city? I see my friend over there with the blonde hair has another question. If we have a couple more minutes, why don't you come ask it?
I apologize.
Question 2. We promised her a second question. She gets a second question.
I apologize. They're more in the form of statements. As a survivor of domestic violence, I would like to ask the impending candidates and the current candidates, what are they planning on doing, if they are planning on doing anything about reforms? I see constantly victims re-victimized and defendants getting off of very light sentences. Unless a defendant commits murder, they don't serve any kind of serious jail time. I'm wondering if there's any plans outside from the politicians that I know in my community that I work with in terms of amending. I'd like to see some amendments in case law take place. That's one of my biggest dreams. If that happens, I'll leave the earth a very happy person. If I never have to see another person suffer needlessly or not get justice, or the cycle goes on and the defendant just keeps committing offenses, they think it's a joke. The penalties have to be stiffer. Okay. So that's what I would like to say to any impending candidates.
So tougher penalties or judges who take those crimes and the punishment seriously?
The way the laws stand now, because they're mostly misdemeanor. I would like to see felony weight penalties in abuse cases, that doesn't have to be attempted murder or actual murder before a person, or that they poured acid on a person or ran them over before they actually serve any actual jail time.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight. I'd like to thank our host from Lehman College, and on behalf of CBS 2 and our partners, WCBS Radio 880, 1010 Wins Radio News, the New York Daily News, the New York Immigration Coalition, and Common Cause New York, we want to thank all of you for coming. And to our viewers at home and on social media, we'd like to remind you that we're holding these meetings in all 5 boroughs throughout the month of June. The next one is Thursday night in Queens. And it's one way that as New Yorkers that you can have your voice be heard. It's a forum where you can share your questions and concerns and let us know what qualities you would like to see in this year's candidates, not only for mayor, but for comptroller and public advocate as well. Thank you very much for coming, and good night.